Well, thank you, Leah. And good to be back. Well, I've been here twice already this year, but by back, I mean with a return of the viewer panel because it used to be the regular thing on Saturday, and we haven't had one for a couple of years, largely because there's been tweaks, but the viewers tends to just be the viewer. We often forget, however, that when we're looking at something like OpenSim or even something like Second Life, that we think of the server-side software, that is serving up the grids and the content and everything. And then we think of the viewer as the way we log into those servers to get hold of our assets and move around and things. But we have to remember there is a middle ground where the viewer connects with the server, obviously, but they can depend on each other quite a bit. For example, some of the server-side security things need to be reflected in the viewer, and some of the actions the viewer wants to take have to actually work with server-side technology too. Now, I was fascinated by Mike Chase's address yesterday, and he's on the panel with us today, of course. So, welcome, Mike.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And I noticed one of the things, I think this is a good place to start actually while we get ourselves organized. One of the things you were talking about on your panel was actually was your plans for additional security layers and things that would, I guess, be equally in the viewer and server side. So, it's a viewer issue, but it also relates to server side too. Would you like to round up a little bit of that here before we start as a prompt for conversation, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities to do work with the viewer teams to help improve overall security. That would be ideal because there certainly is a relationship between the two pieces. What we can support from the server side is somewhat limited because we have to ultimately send the assets down to the viewer and because the viewer needs them to be able to render. So
Yeah.
um, there's definitely opportunities to work together, and I think there's also some things that are being looked at initially for Second Life, but I'd love to see them adopted into OpenSim, like GLTF and
Yes.
the PBR rendering and some of those things, which actually have an impact on security as well, since you have a scene. You're getting handed a scene instead of just or portions of the scene instead of just individual assets. So definitely, we need to be able to work together.
Actually, that's a good segue because Humble Tim, I know, obviously, I know you've been Safari all over the place, but you're also in both OMI, where I had a panel with OMI yesterday, and the Metaverse Standards. I'm going to say authority. It's not. It's not an authority yet, but it feels like it sometimes. Of course, the what was it's the script in G something you just mentioned, Mike?
GLTF, yeah.
GLTF, that's it. Now, if I recall, Hamilton, isn't the GLTF have a working group on OMI? I don't know whether you're part of it, but would you?
Oh yeah, there's a GLTF extensions subgroup that gets
Okay,
together on Thursdays,
that's the one.
and
I think Adam, who is in that one, isn't it? He unfortunately has COVID at the moment, so he hasn't been able to be here this year. Could you explain a little bit to? Because I'm a bit of a layman on some of these things. Exactly what the GLTF format is all about.
sure. Maybe the simplest entry point here would be it's kind of like the um, next evolution of Collada in a way, because Kronos Group also championed the Collada format, which is
Yeah.
used extensively already in the Second Life and OpenSim ecosystem. And so GLTF is kind of can be thought of maybe as a refined, uh, you know, reimagining of that into like a more modern, extensible uh, specification.
Right.
But a lot of the same things are starting to have parity now with because Scalata actually has a whole bunch of features, right? And GLTF kind of started with the basics and then uses extensions to imagine things like lights or different extensions for physics are emerging.
Right.
So it's more of a socket kind of system where you can plug different things in, which is a little bit different than something like FBX or Cloud historically.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm used to, the great thing about people who author in, Unity and presumably the other one, the other U, they're used to dealing with embedded lights and all that sort of thing. And of course, we can do that in the viewer end, but it's harder to do, bring all that kind of information down server side. Mike, how would you possibly see this GLTF format sort of being integrated with something like an OpenSim viewer or OpenSim generally?
Well, one of the things that you can do with GLTF via the plugins that was mentioned is watermarking of assets. So, from a security perspective, which you asked about earlier, there's an opportunity to potentially um, keep a watermark with the actual data itself and be able to tell if something's been modified or trace it back to the original item. But the other thing is that it's good for it's allows us to represent an entire scene potentially. Um, so it's a bigger thing than just a single individual asset, and I think those things together give us the ability to potentially have a more secure environment. The viewer will still have the asset data,
Yeah.
and since it's open, the source for that is open. Of course, there's opportunities for people to take advantage of that, but it gives us a bit more tools to potentially manage and understand and where assets are coming from.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, I think when I first heard you mentioning all this, I suddenly thought, well, I thought two things. One is that there are understandably a few people in OpenSim who don't like the idea of extra security, let alone a centralized thing. But the other thing I thought of too is this sounds, although you didn't mention it by name, this sounds like a sort of thing that runs in the parallel with like this blockchain business, which I'm not really up to date on. I mean, I know cryptocurrencies come and go, and most seem to collapse these days after a while, but the security of the blockchain and things. I know back in when Philip was doing high fidelity, it was coming into play and stuff, but I've never really quite got a grip on that. But the back end side of what you're talking about here, Mike, does seem to have parallels with that in
It,
terms of identifying creators and passages of an item down the line till it gets to the user, that kind of thing.
well, it's yeah, blockchains are a way to represent data that, and certainly it, it's certainly high on the hype level right now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's ultimately what's going to be the best thing for our environment, but it certainly is a possibility. And to me, the important part is first and foremost to understand the requirements, what things we want to be able to reason about, and what metadata we want to save about assets, so that we can make decisions about provenance and things like that. That's where I've been trying to focus in terms of our NGC work with Trusted Grid, but and then ultimately the blockchain may be the implementation that we adopt. We'll have to see.
Are there any parallels here to what, going off subject in a way, Linden Labs actually operates at the moment? Or is this completely out of that sphere of reference in terms of development? The reason I'm asking is I've always thought that Tilia, who of course is the money and asset system of Second Life, they're busy promoting themselves to other games, other services now.
Yeah.
And it always occurred to me that, well, if Linden Lamb wanted to compete with, say, Kitely and Globis and stuff like that, they could actually, institute systems where they could actually sell assets from, somebody creating in Second Life, for example, could market. You've got copy mod and the other one, but you could also have an export one, for example. And so long as that was trace backable for security reasons, then if it was exportable, technically the Linden Lab marketplace could then sell it to somebody on the region in OpenSim. If it's because of the commonality between the viewer for both, if you see what I mean.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they're going to do that, but it was seamless sort of if Tilia, Linden Labs really wanted to expand Tilia, you might find them getting into that sort of, competing with Kitely kind of thing. We really don't know, but I keep thinking up these ideas along the lines of could it be done? It's a question I'm always asking myself. And it seems to me that if you have a secure system for things like payments and ownership, you might have something there that you build into, with Firestorm presumably to work in OpenSIM that could also work outside of OpenSIM. Do you see? Is that part of your thinking?
I think it's definitely possible. It's hard to know, of course, what Linden Labs, how they're going to commercialize
Oh yeah.
or monetize all those assets, but it represents, if you think about all of the things that are in SL right now, it's a huge potential uh, thing to monetize. And exchange is certainly something that could be managed to do correctly. So it's definitely possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go in that direction. But we'll have to kind of see how they develop their own stack.
All right. Um,
And any of the payment systems can be integrated into really anything. I mean, there's the centralized ones. I mean, these days even Visa might be interested in doing micro transactions,
Mhm.
and using any of the decentralized systems like the crypto coins, as well as the centralized systems. You just need a currency that people are willing to use and is fairly stable.
all right. Welcome, Mr. Blue. By the way, we're glad we got your voice working. So
Finally got some voice.
yeah, lovely. All three of us are here now. Great. I was keen to hear what you thought about that.
Well, and you were talking about GLTF earlier.
Yeah.
I've I was the one that created one of the tools for converting. I created Convor, which is an application that converts a OR file into a GLTF scene file.
All right.
And the things that I've been incorporating into the Bazel viewer that I talked about yesterday is a region module that converts um, Linden prim formats into GLTF formats, and
Okay.
then the question after that is how to build it up into scenes, because there's all the stuff about level of detail and everything. And there are other standards which are kind of
I was just,
scene and world formats.
yeah,
There's
is
like
that
the op-
USB, a universal scene format or something? That isn't that a Kronos thing?
well, the Pixar has the universal scene description,
That's
which is
it.
a way of describing the scene and the. But essentially, you talk to it through an API. You can build a viewer to talk to the data system um, after they've compiled it up. But eventually it can be turned into GLTF, which then you can render in a browser or any viewer. I mean, GLTF was made by Kronos,
Yeah.
and the particular point was to represent the represent the meshes in such a way that it was easy to give to a graphics processor. So it's kind of been pre-digested for display, and you keep other formats to keep all the editing stuff, and that's what Universal Scene Description has. To keep all the provenance and how the layers go together and how the light works and all that sort of stuff. And then you turn it into GLTF or some other mesh form in order to render.
Does it have a bit like video, so degrees of compression? So, for example, a scene on a high resolution monitor and a high resolution device could be high resolution, yet the same scene could be used on a low resolution device. That's obviously low resolution. Is that is adaptable in that way, or is it very much the fixed
Well, there is, I believe, in process one of the GLTF extensions for level of detail, which would allow pre-level to detail stuff to be done in the file format. There are also systems like the cesium tile system, which is a way of representing the world in different resolutions. So if you're looking at a city from far away, you get low resolution buildings, and when you get closer, you get higher resolution. There's the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is working on standards for that kind of world view level of detail representation. And then there are a lot of new plugins in the renderers. I mean, both Unity and Unreal Engine do a lot of optimizing for low and high resolution to speed up the display. So there's lots of different levels to approach the problem at.
I've noticed, I suppose certainly in the last couple of years and stuff, a lot of the idea of interoperability between OpenSim and other platforms. Now, it's limited for sure, but I've always found, we're different models. We go back to the 20-year model of Second Life kind of thing almost. But things like people are actually able to export things from Second Life and dump them in to things like Unity to modify and then re-export in ways that could go elsewhere. The Cyber Lounge people literally is a web world. It's well, it's XR, isn't it? But all the objects there, you can tell that it's like a very simple scene built in OpenSim, I believe, and then just converted so that it can be put on the web. And it seems to me the other issue is whether we're going to be able to. I mean, this is probably more server side, but it's down to the viewer to render it, of course. Whether we're going to be able to bring more complex things in to OpenSim from something like exporting from Unity. We know it can be done. I mean, something like my mesh avatar here, probably somebody else did it for me, but it probably took a roundabout route. But let's say I wanted to bring in an avatar or an object that had embedded lighting in it, for example, and was able to project that lighting on its surroundings. Now, could there be a model that could bring that into the viewers we've got now? I know it can be done with lighting and projectors in roundabout ways, but could we bring an element of a scene into this world using those other technologies and have it work in the viewer? Loaded
Well,
question.
I'd say it kind of depends on the viewer. I mean, the Open Simulator just deals with sending objects to the viewer, and then the viewer has to interpret the characteristics.
Yeah.
If you have if you define a material using NVIDIA's material definition format, then any of the third-party renderers wouldn't be able to do that because they don't know how to handle that sort of material.
Wait, exactly. Yeah.
So and that's one of the things of building a new viewer is that we can add stuff to that viewer that Second Life doesn't have.
Yeah.
And so how far, I mean, another viewer discussion to have is how far do we want Open Simulator to veer away from Second Life? Because once we have new lighting modules, material modules, interaction of avatar abilities. We add the full body tracking, and we can do all the VR stuff with Open Simulator, but you can't do it in Second Life. Is that a problem?
That's a good question. In my opinion, there are reasons why people can come from, say, Second Life and find OpenSim so easy to use because it is literally the same viewer. It feels like the same program almost to the end user. They don't know about the differences behind the scenes. On the other hand, if you could argue that if everything improved, inverted commas, it would attract more people. Although the other question is, what kind of people everything wants to attract. I mean, the tribes that form in Somewhere Second Life are very particular to that sort of commercial world, with its shopping and everything else. Much less so in OpenSim, where what you do is, I think, more important than the lifestyle thing, if you see what I mean. So I don't know. What's all your thoughts? So Hamilton, for example, do you think a rebuild of the viewer that substantially changed the similarities with Second Life, which is the question here? What would you think about that? Do you think it was workable?
I think it's an interesting question. Some of these things seem like they could be unfolded a little bit more. Like, let's say that it did diverge, or that there was a decision is made and it goes off in a direction. Anyone who who doesn't participate in that new direction, might get left behind, for example.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's a complex ecosystem right now. So keeping things in reasonable lockstep. It's at once a constraint, right, to maintain compatibility, but it's also meant to be freeing, right, to let interoperability, backfill what would have been a gap there. And I think there are definitely possibilities. I think trying to get towards kind of a more holistic appreciation for virtual world like essentials is where that's where the incremental progress seems to be being made around the periphery of that. And simple things just like being able to do presence detection across platforms right now can be difficult.
Yeah. And even, I think of examples of things you never expected that suddenly came around very easily, like the way both Second Life and OpenSim can handle mesh now. We never, 10 years ago, we never thought we could possibly have that. But it's happened, and there's a bit of a furore about it when it first comes in, but it's been backwards compatible, by and large. People can still do what they did before mesh, but now they can do stuff with mesh. So it's been a step forward. How about Misterblue? How about you on that? The divergence between the two platforms, Linden and OpenSim. Would it be a good thing, bad thing, unknown?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh well, I'm kind of interested in the fact that there is hundreds of new virtual worlds out there, and that they each have their own reason for existence. They have different features. They have different audiences. That Roblox is different than VR chat, and OpenSim exists mainly as a stepping stone from Second Life. Just as people who hate Twitter and want a decentralized system move to Mastodon, people who are tired of spending estate fees in Second Life, they move to Open Simulator.
Yeah.
And so I think Open Simulator's reason for existence is its compatibility to Second Life. So I would, if it was my, if I was king of the world, I would say that Open Simulator should always stay pretty compatible to Second Life so that people can come over, but then we will end up with added features. We will add more features so that once someone comes over to OpenSim, it is so much more awesome they will never go back.
Yeah, well, like NPCs and stuff that we've had that people for Second Life don't understand. Mike, any more thoughts from you on this? The division.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with the comments Misterblue just made. I think personally, I think that we should stay at least fairly close in compatibility with SL, because in many cases the users that we're picking up, new users are coming over from the Second Life environment, and there's benefit to the similarity. But the other factor to me that I think is really critical is just plain economics. Mr. Blue mentioned during his talk how much work is involved in doing a new viewer, and just the economics of developing and improving and supporting a viewer for the OpenSim community is, it would be great if all of that was done via donations of time, but some amount of compensation is probably necessary to maintain and keep a team together that could actually do that. Another example I can point at is Lisa's presentation where she talked about crowdfunding for the SceneGate viewer, and how little donations have been received to date to support the project. So I really think that in some ways we're going to be a little bit of a stepchild to SL just to maintain a viewer that's functional, because it's doing that kind of development's expensive, and I don't think we potentially have the resources to do it well. But I do think there's opportunities to extend it a bit, and and do some things that are new and different.
I know that. So I remember Jessica at Firestorm just said, and she hasn't been here for a couple of years. I think it's about 1% of the interest in Firestorm development has to do with OpenSim. Everybody else, all her team of devs, who are as active as they can possibly be, but they're all into the SL side of it. They're not really. Nobody wants to work on the OpenSim variant, so to speak. And actually, well, it's an allied issue, of course. I mean, there's been discussion here around conference for several years about, 1 year the devs somehow managed to achieve quite a lot. Another year there doesn't seem to have been much change. But there's always this underlying thing of there's no central person in charge, and there's nobody is paying for the efforts. It's all volunteer efforts. And at the same time, I think the general feeling amongst devs is that they don't want to be paid for something like this. It sort of feels like it shouldn't be. Maybe it just shouldn't be a job or something. But I think that Linden Labs obviously have an advantage. They're a company with lots of people to do that stuff. So I think there's always going to be this question of where, in terms of compatibility with Linden Labs, what do we take and what do we discard? I know the OpenSim Firestorm already has things missing that are in Second Life. On the other hand, we've got things they haven't got. Humble Tim, I'm going to come back to you because I know you've been working on it's like a Firestorm variant, isn't it? I gather. Would you like to tell me a bit about that? Because there you actually have a viewer that you're working with, I guess.
Yeah, so Peter Kapler, P373R, came up with a pretty simplified strategy to modify Firestorm's rendering loop to pretty much literally render the left and right eye one after the other. So it's not ideal because you don't get any, it's literally double the cost, but it's simple to maintain so that it can be it can track kind of as Firestorm, official Firestorm makes new releases, this set of changes can be reapplied. And so you can, so it doesn't create like a fragmentation effect as Firestorm moves on. And so I'm volunteering to maintain that build, and it's a prototype build. It's rough around the edges. It's kind of awkward to do the first time setup, but it demonstrates that it is, technically, not just possible, but with modern async reprojection on current VR helmets, you can get an acceptable experience. Even if the frame rate in Firestorm drops to like 15 to 20, the async reprojection, if you're just kind of gently moving around and looking around, makes it still feel kind of buttery smooth. So we're passing that kind of Moore's tipping point, maybe, where it may be true that frame rate was a serious challenge before, but it's starting to become, increasingly more and more true that the hardware's caught up, and you can take unoptimized content and get VR frame rates out of it now.
And talking of left and right eyes, I see you've changed. Very
I
good.
well, thanks to Marcus Lynn, I think the lizard may have made it in.
Oh,
It's interesting. I tried to. This is an Outworlds tutorial avatar, and it's finally actually just loading on my mobile broadband for me. Hopefully, it's sitting down in the chair for everyone else.
right.
Yeah, it's kind of there now.
Oh, there it is. Yes, sorry,
You've been weird for a while.
and now you've become normal, or at least the normal I recognize from Safari and stuff.
But this is
Okay,
a quick to touch back on GLTF and
yeah.
import export and stuff. I actually tried to go because I had this avatar on OSCred, and I tried to go in and actually export it because I had uploaded this avatar. I had gotten the collada from the Outworlds tutorial website, and I wanted to make my own avatar, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And this was the easy path. And I couldn't actually get the recovery phase to work here. I couldn't export it from Firestorm in OSGrid, even though, like, there shouldn't have been any permissions or anything like that because I'm the one who uploaded it. And so it's something to think about when we try and run in parallel the idea of protecting artists' rights to kind of determine the fate of their creations and how they're used. And then also like other artists' rights, like my right today to have this public domain avatar. I just wanted to bring it over here. I wasn't trying to rip anything or copy bot or anything. And I think maybe that experience has degraded because the two sides are polarized, right? So it would be
Right.
great, I think, to imagine ways of, addressing both of those needs simultaneously somehow. It'll require, different kinds of compromise, but I think it's possible to protect both sets of interests, to make it so that those creating and sharing free content who want it to be unencumbered have an option, and then those wishing to create kind of refined, guided experiences where they kind of determine all the rules could also be supported.
Yeah, strong.
It's actually quite interesting because coming back to the Firestorm thing, I'm not very much helmet orientated. I've got to admit. I mean, I don't like the idea of full immersion. I like to hear a bit of sound around me or see it out the side of my eyes, in case something awful happens. Paranoia, I think it's called. But I get from what I gather from the news and reviews and stuff like that, the most successful, I hate using the metaverse word, but a lot of the virtual reality stuff, the helmet world, if you like, most successful things seem to be one-off viewer experiences. So, you might say, well, a Firestorm that's only got 15 frames a second is not going to be really on the par. But if it's designed to be viewing, and as you say, things move slowly, maybe you don't stand up or try running around in OpenSim, it may well work because the people using it won't actually be demanding that huge fidelity. They want the immersion of 3D, if you see what I mean. But will they really want that super slick performance? Maybe, of course, they'll compare it to things that are super slick performing. I don't know, but it seems to me a lot of these things that really just glorify videos are things that have been successful when people, log into their helmet to an experience. So, it, people always talk about fast, quick, easy, and everything else. But the trade-off, as you said, is the quality of what you've got. One of you mentioned earlier on what the thing that I always thought were voxels, where the instead of pixels, basically, or as you said, the scene in the distance was actually very low res. It was just an idea to give you what was in the distance. But as you move towards it, the renderer brought it into a high resolution. So by the time you actually walked up to something, it was in glorious, of fidelity. When you were talking about that, particularly in your case, Humbleton, with the helmet experience, do you think there is a place for like a different class of viewer for depending on the actual device you're using to interface? I mean, some people can log in on a mobile phone and the screen's high res. It's just the phone itself is tiny. Do we need to adapt to all those? A question for all of you, really, but do we need to adapt to all those different formats of interfacing device that are coming along? Not the viewer and server, but the actual devices.
Well, yes, I absolutely think so because um, I consider the virtual worlds a point on a continuum. That is, there are times that you want to communicate with your friends, and store and forward is good enough. You can send them a text message or an email. And there's some times that you want to chat with them right now. You want to talk to them or text with them, and you need to have them there. And there's sometimes that you need presence. That is, you want to be in the same space. Um, so I think it would be cool if somehow we extended the virtual world so that there was the viewer type things, whether you used a headset or a desktop, to have presence. That is, you're in a place, you're experiencing the space, and then you had, I guess, you could step back to lower level um, communication for like mobile. I mean, somehow having the whole 3D experience on a phone is not the same as a headset. And so maybe you just need voice and some um, less graphic intensive thing, and then go all the way down to being able to chat with just text with the text system. So I think that we could make kind of a continuum of viewers to tie people together in either socially or in groups or however that works out. Um,
I
I don't really see moving the whole 3D experience onto your phone or your watch is really what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting into it from anywhere and everywhere is one thing, and it's probably good. But yes, you know I'm on a desktop most of the time, but I still have a program running on one computer, which is Radagast. You probably heard of it, and it basically allows me to get hold of friends in Second Life without having to bother with the whole interface. It's just text channel, and you can activate voice if you really need to, but it's finicky. It's best. It's just like a messaging service, because I don't need to be in Second Life anymore, except on rare occasions. So the other two, sorry, that was Mr. Blue, wasn't it? Mike Hamilton, your thoughts on that?
Well,
The devices, that is.
I would agree. I think we need to be able to tailor the experience to the device in terms of what works best. What I would probably do on a handheld phone, even though it has a high res screen, is going to be different than what I'll do on a full desktop machine with all of the interface capabilities that has. So yeah, I think it's probably important to be able to support the different experiences on the devices that make sense for those devices.
Yeah. How about Tim?
I think when you're scheduled for a meeting, for example, and you're trying to get into virtual world spaces, it can already be challenging no matter what device you choose.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to, you know, reduce that friction in general, and if that means form factor specific kind of designs, then if that's what it takes. In the mobile, in the web, World Wide Web, kind of the progression. There was a time where if you wanted when mobile was first emerging, if you wanted a mobile website and a desktop website, you would pay, twice the price essentially to have two things created.
Yeah.
And then if you fast way forward, responsive design emerged to where the overlap finally became apparent enough to where we could kind of, in many cases, solve both of those needs via a single responsive design. But it took us a while to get there. I think that kind of research and experimentation to uncover what actually works, because I don't know why 3D televisions didn't work, but it kind of seems like it was a fad that has kind of subsided. So if we can find out like where those kind of dead ends are, I think that's one of the
I read a lot
next
of I read a lot of news feeds, and I get fed up with if you follow anything with the M word in it these days, you're just flooded. Um, but one second I'm getting an article saying nobody's interested in this VR and the helmets and stuff, and then you get another article saying it's going to be the next big thing. None of them actually ever seem to really know what they're talking about. They're probably reading somebody's press release, but I mean, um, I think a lot of people feel like me about the cumbersome nature of helmet verse, as I call it. Um, if I would love, I wear spectacles now for reading and watching my screen and stuff, so I have to put them on anyway. If I could have a pair of actual glasses that Bluetooth or on a wire or whatever connected to my iPhone, for example, I could quite easily see how the small screen experience on an iPhone with a very fast processor, mind you, and good graphics, could actually just transpose itself into the glasses and be a satisfying kind of experience. And I've always said that although I don't like the idea of putting a helmet on, if I had, tethered or not, a helmet on my desk, and say I was in a meeting and needed to get a bit of movement enhancement or something, then I'd be quite willing to strap a helmet on for 10 or 20 minutes to actually do something. But I can live my life in that thing. But on the other hand, I can wear music headphones for, well, actually, I don't like them for too long, but maybe an hour or two. And I think of how headphones transformed culture, portable Walkman and, well, earpods now. We thought nothing of that, music that moved around with us. So if we can have environments that somehow can move around with us, but would be pausable on request kind of thing, I think the take up would be greater. If you could if you can point your iPhone at a shop and it reads, one of those codes, and then immediately gives you a virtual reality version of the shop, and you can sort of guides you into the shop. That's all augmented reality, really, but that seems to be where it's all sort of taking off. So the question, the question really is how much our viewers, for example, will act to augment our lives in such a way that they're easy to get into and they actually have a valid use for us other than for a specific thing we might do in OpenSim or a shopping experience you might go to Second Life for. If the devices will all be different, but can they interconnect? In other words, can my monitor do an instant switch to a pair of glasses via the iPhone, etc.? I think. Let's see, Mike. What you were talking about yesterday, for example, a lot of stuff that is definitely to do with security there. But do you think there's anything that could be built on the back end, so to speak, between what we have at the moment? The server side will probably still be much the same, but some kind of viewer that would be adaptable to all these different circumstances. Just like I'm watching our own video on screen at the moment. You can view it in 360p or you can go up to 1080p. It's flexible. Is there anything like that we could do with a viewer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's opportunities. Right now, what we use to represent assets and inventory is fairly simple. If we can start to add additional information on the server side, and that can get presented to the viewer where it can take advantage of it in terms of how, I mean, for instance, it would be handy to be able to see the provenance of an object and understand, hey, this is where this thing came from, so I can make a decision about what I want to do with it. I think there's definitely things that we can do on the server side that would help drive more usability on the viewer as well.
Anybody else thoughts on that?
Well, and that for me, I start thinking of that as a question about where do you want to put the optimization in or the adaptation.
Right.
I mean, there's you can make it so the content has a whole bunch of level of detail information in it. What does the low resolution look like, and that pushes or also enables the creator to create those different views. Then there's the technology. There's the rendering technology that can take a high resolution picture and use a smart neural network thing to create a low resolution vision of it, and that frees the creator from having to create the low resolution version. So
Okay.
there's lots of solutions possible.
Yeah. Oh, it's all worth thinking about. I'm amazed how time flies. I thought we're about half an hour, and I'm just told we're about a minute away from wrapping. Amazing. In on the YouTube channel here, there's actually a question here. I'll get a brief answer from all of you from somebody called Master Gate. It would be much better if grid owners can find a customized viewer which can be tagged only for their grid to avoid confusion for new members. Does that ring any bells for you?
Well, and that's a great idea. I mean, the any viewer that anyone creates should be very skinnable, and thus it can be branded, I guess is what they call it these days.
Yeah.
With either the look and the name and everything of a particular grid. I think that would be a great addition. And there has been some attempts at doing that. But
Yes, I have, yeah. Anybody else on that one? Do you think it's a good thing? I mean, especially Mike, from the security point of view, sort of, would that be thinking, what you're working on? Would it appeal to individual grid owners just for that? The customizable aspect of it, security and whatever.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, it would be a way for the grid owners that are involved in the trusted grid to know that you're connecting via a viewer that is helping to support what you're doing.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I hate doing this, but I've got Leah telling me we've got to get out of it. So I'm afraid that's going to be for questions. But I guess you guys might be hanging around somewhere afterwards if people want to ask you some questions. But we're going to have to free the stage for the next session, I'm afraid. So over to you, Leah.
Hey, thank you, Mal, and thanks to our panel for such a wonderful presentation. As a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out the conference.opensimulator.org to see what is coming up on the conference schedule. You won't want to miss our next session, which begins at 2 p.m. in this region, and it's entitled Exoplanet Activity in an Immersive 3D World Planetarium, and it'll be immediately followed by the Matrix game. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC22 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations and to explore the hypergrid resources in OSCC Expo 2 region, along with our sponsor and crowdfunder booths located throughout all of the Expo regions. Thank you again to our speakers and to the audience.